Thank you guys so much for coming and being live audience. We're going to talk about mental health and bringing it to churches. So I started a counseling practice a couple years ago called Itinerant, and the word comes from a couple centuries ago when John Wesley and company were traveling for thousands of miles around the British countryside on horseback. We're not keeping that as part of our current agenda, unfortunately, but they would go and preach in various locations. So what we're doing with itinerant counseling is bringing mental health therapy to various locations, and we're specifically trying to bring care to congregations. So this video is all about partnering with churches, trying to get more churches interested in chatting with us. Right now, registration is open for churches to tell us about their interests, and then we're following up with like coffee and conversation to see if it'll work out for them. I've been doing this for a year now at one church. So one day a week, I go in person and make a makeshift therapy office on their campus. And then their congregants, members of their church, can sign up for a slot and come get therapy for free. The church pays for it in a building that's familiar to them. The reason that I'm doing this video with Laura is we're trying to get her a church to work with as well. The idea is that you would let churches pick a day of the week, and then they would have either me or Laura come out on that day, say Wednesday, every week. The church that I've been doing this with for the past year is in Fort Payne, Alabama. And it's the craziest thing. This is a mid-sized church. It's probably like 300 to 400 people. And every therapy slot has been filled for every week for a year and counting.
What?
And we just renewed the contract to do it again for another year. Yeah, so you've got like 7 slots in a day with a lunch break in there, and we've had at least 7 people signed up every week. Churches pay for the therapist, but they only pay for the therapist to be there one day a week. So it feels like it's kind of been a sweet spot where churches that aren't mega and can't build a counseling wing can still have something that's quite a bit more robust than just like a referral. Like, here's a phone number. They've got somebody who kind of gets into the weeds with their congregation and knows their people and starts to understand their culture and can meet on their campus with consistency. So the church has somebody they can trust, somebody who's in-house, but it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Bella, I saw you had a question. Yeah.
Where did that idea come from? Like, I've never heard of this before.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. I wanted to make therapy more affordable to people, because I don't know if you guys have looked at it, but the going rate in Birmingham is like $160 out of pocket to meet with somebody for 50 minutes. And if you think about a normal counseling journey lasting about 3 months, that's 12 sessions. That adds up pretty quick. I don't know, $1,800, something in that range, which is just out of reach. It's not realistic for a lot of people. And especially if you're on the fence about going, you're not going to spend $2,000 on it. My background is in ministry, and so I have some idea of how church budgets work. And I started finding that when I was getting coffee with pastors, they almost all have some kind of like extended care budget to help like shepherd and pastorally care for their people. But in a lot of cases, it's not really getting tapped. It's not getting leveraged or accessed. So I was running into all these pastors who were happy to help subsidize sessions. They just needed to connect people in need to the right resources. And then like going all the way to going on campus at the church, I didn't know if that would work or not, and then it's just really like blossomed, and mountains are moving in session, and it seems like a really cool thing, and so I'm leaning into that and excited to do more of it. John Wesley, during his itinerancy, traveled 250,000 miles, it's estimated, on horseback. He kept a really rigorous journal, and so I just think about that while I'm driving to Fort Payne, Alabama in my Camry. What you got, Cooper?
What would you say to a congregant at a potential church who is considering taking you guys on as like a kind of in-house therapist, who's like, I have my pastor to go and talk to about that. You know, like I already like have pastoral counseling. Why do I need professional counseling also in the church?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that pops into my mind is just a practical time constraint consideration. Once you get past a couple hundred people in your church, it's pretty difficult for the pastor to meet individually with people on a regular basis for an hour. The other thing that's cool about this is that confidentiality is a big part of the magic. And so let's say that there's some embarrassing details or some things that you feel a little shy about sharing. Well, you're going to run to your pastor at the grocery store in the Little League baseball field, and bringing a therapist in from the outside but who also kind of gets to know your church, but doesn't actually go to your church, kind of threads this needle of they're not going to linger in your life. They're not who you're inviting to Friendsgiving. And you kind of create this vault inside of the church where you can like unload everything. Yeah, and then that person just kind of hovers back out. Yeah, one thing that is also cool is it sort of paves the way for churches to do a little bit more ongoing hand-in-hand partnership with the therapist. Like if I refer somebody out to see a therapist and just give a phone number or a website, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for pastoral follow-up. Whereas when I'm in the church, we don't share any details of the stuff, the stories and the content, but we do share the names of everybody who's come just with the lead pastoral staff. So they just know Bill, Bob, Sally, Susie have come to therapy X number of times. They can vet that those truly are members and not just random people that they're paying for to come to therapy. But then they can also, with tact, of course, like lean in and say like, how's it going? Let me know if there's anything that I can follow up with. I'm not talking directly to the pastor about the people, but the people and the pastor can like organically kind of walk hand in hand through some things. Another cool thing for churches, I don't know if it's cool, but it's technically helpful, is that we take on all of the professional liability. Itinerant counseling takes on the professional liability with our own like liability insurance for the like counseling work. So there's a few churches that have gotten into a little bit of a sticky situation trying to field things like trauma or suicidal thinking, and they didn't necessarily have like the credentials to do it, and then they ended up and so yeah, if a pastor is feeling a little like out of depth or like this is getting pretty sticky or I just want to bring in another layer of support here, it makes a lot of sense for like pastoral reasons, logistical reasons, legal reasons. Confidentiality is probably the biggest thing that sets it apart from pastoral counseling. I mean, imagine that one of your complaints is about the church or about people in the church. It can get kind of hard to like get vulnerable and honest with your pastor about that. But this is just like a no consequence, no embarrassment, no repercussion space. And it makes it different from chatting with a teacher, pastor, parent, coach, or any other like authority figure that you're gonna run into along the way. Laura?
Yeah, I think just one further thought maybe is that a lot of times people really need to work on their relationship with the Lord. And a pastor has a particular likeness in our minds to like the conduit to the God that we hear about. Sometimes to have another angle where you can be more honest about how you really are relating to God. It can just be more of a siloed space. I think there are ways that we need God to listen to us very deeply that we don't know how to talk to God. But we might more easily talk to someone that we don't associate with the God that we hear about on Sunday, which is an odd, I don't know, just sometimes a kind of gap in our thinking that someone who's outside gives us an opportunity to hear ourselves as we're more honest and being listened to with that kind of safety of my pastor's not going to preach a sermon. But I'm not going to wonder on Sunday whether the sermon is to me.
Yeah, you think going in that it's not going to complicate things to like share big time emotional trauma, but it is pretty difficult for it not to complicate relationships. It just adds like weird power imbalances and stuff, and this just kind of gets rid of all those concerns. Yeah, I totally agree with that first part you said. Even for myself, it feels like I need to talk with an outsider, so to speak, about this very like inside, almost like familial experience I'm having in my church and with my theology. Eric, what were you gonna say?
I think it's related to a practical question. So like, let's say the church has like 300 people, and you meet 7 sessions in a week. I know you said you need like 3 months to be like an adequate session, and then also like most are like, why not? Why make it a one-time? So my question is, are most people like one-time sessions? And if not, how do you account for the numbers?
In the clinical therapy ethics, the professional ethics guidelines, we're really not supposed to be keeping people in therapy for like years on end. Some people need it if there's like really acute trauma, ongoing stuff, but for the most part, 2 to 3 months of weekly meetings is like a pretty nice start for a therapeutic journey. And then we kind of reevaluate. Do we want to extend this by a few sessions, or do we feel like we've kind of hit the presenting stuff and now you're going to kind of fly the nest and go out there and do the stuff in your life? So aiming at pretty brief journeys with people. And yeah, part of that's like an ethical thing. If you don't want people becoming dependent on their counseling relationship over the long haul, you want them to go and fly and flourish, and you want to empower them and release them to make decisions. But then just practically how to help the churches best. Seems like an 8 to 12 session aiming point sort of makes sense logistically to sort of get the right flow of people coming through. But if churches are worried about, do my numbers make sense, just to do the quick math, if like 3 people come, you're already getting a good deal financially, versus like sending those out to get the market rate from counseling. So if you're a church that thinks that 3 people in your church need counseling, then financially it makes sense. So maybe not a church of 80 people, maybe not a church of 3,000 people, because they might be ready to just hire a counselor to pretty much live there. But mid-sized churches is the people that the solution is built for. Yeah.
So kind of to follow up, essentially you'll have 7
slots.
yeah, for like 2 to 3 months, and then that will shift to like 7 more slots in the next 2 to 3 months. So it's like 7 people at a time, essentially.
7 people at a time, but people are always like exiting and entering.
Right, okay.
So it's kind of a revolving door.
Got it.
And then if, say, you had 14 people who needed counseling all at once, then you start scheduling people for every other week.
Okay.
So really, like 3 to 14 people who are like actively needing therapy is kind of the flow of people that it makes sense for. Yeah. Yep. Okay. That is pretty much how it works, like the mechanics of how it works. Any follow-up thoughts from you on just that piece?
I'm wondering a little bit, as you said that it kind of spreading through small groups, and it sounds like there's a kind of equipping that is ideal as a sort of a contagious wellness for the congregation that it sounds like you're already seeing in some of your work.
I'm actively trying to think about how to just like empower and release even more, so that it becomes organic and ongoing and becomes part of the DNA of the church, and it's not just me doing 7 sessions. Yeah, I'm mulling that over right now. This Wednesday, actually, I'm sticking around after my sessions and sharing at the midweek gathering for that church in Fort Payne. So I think the hope is to also be like teaching emotionally healthy spirituality to the church, and you're most likely going to be on the church's website, up on stage at least once or twice along the way, and this is becoming kind of a part of the fabric of the church, but haven't really hammered out the broader scope of exactly what that looks like, and it's going to change with church to church of what they want that to look like, I guess, but
Has potential.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought initially I thought nobody's going to come and do this. It's going to start with grief groups and anxiety groups and anger groups and parenting groups, because we're going to have to like coax people into like coming to stuff. And then that's just been totally not the case. People just started signing up for individual therapy sessions. But yeah, if a church was like kind of slower to get on board with it, then there's certainly a lot that we could do by way of like courses or onboarding group stuff. Yeah. Okay. The second thing that we're going to talk about is us. So first, just give us your like alphabet soup. What are your counseling credentials?
Yeah, so I'm a board certified pastoral counselor. I have a Master Divinity degree from Beeson. I'm working on a doctorate at Beeson, looking at fear and the doctrine of adoption as God's children and how that ministers to our fear. So I'm deeply interested in the person in relation to their God, and I think that the presence of an attuned listener is a very powerful thing in anybody's life, and that we have a God who listens to us. We have a God who addresses us and invites us to be known by Him more deeply than we know ourselves. So walking with people wherever they are in the life that they've had so far, the life that they hope to have, has just been a passion and a joy for me. I've done some pastoral counseling in a nonprofit setting. I've done much more informal counseling, mentoring, friendship, but I do think there's something really special about the siloed relationship where it's just this time, just this hour, and really the person who's there as a counselor for you is devoted as listening to you for that time, and you don't have to worry about how is this affecting them, how will this affect our friendship. So that's a start.
It's a lovely start, Laura. We're kind of coming at the work from two slightly different backgrounds. So I went to a public university, got a master's in counseling, and am on the LPC track. You're coming from more the biblical pastoral counseling world. We both have an MDiv in the background. My guess, though, is we do exceptionally similar things in session. So let's talk about that. I think one thing that church members want to know is, what kind of counseling is this? Sure. I always hate that question. But I think what they're really asking is is this going to be something crazy and agenda driven, or is this going to be centered, grounded, tethered to biblical principles? Obviously it's the second one, but I think we might be able to flesh that out a little bit more of what kind of counseling is it. My answer, to give it in plain language, is really just to bring out more humanity from my guests. So I'm interested to see how this bounces off of your PhD brain. But people come in, and a lot of times, because of pain, they've sort of lost touch with parts of themselves or forfeited some of their sense of self. And I think biblically, a big part of healing is becoming more fully human. And that's what I feel like I'm doing in session. So I feel like that's the best way to frame what kind of counseling I'm doing. How's that hit you? Yeah.
I guess my mind goes to people asking about modalities of counseling. Mm-hmm. So, emotionally focused therapy or internal family systems or family systems. And I think the beauty of being really concerned for the humanity of a person and not so concerned for what modality is to be able to draw wisdom from any available and relevant resources in order to help pursue what is true in a person's experience and relationships. So I think that is to not be tied to one modality and to be grounded in a sense of my beliefs about what a person is come from a Christian perspective. I think that gives a kind of flexibility as you meet a person and hear what it is that's troubling them, to lean in different directions and really to trust that God is the healer.
That's what I try to do. Yeah. I think of the modalities as tools in a toolkit, but the thing we're trying to do is restore wholeness. Yeah. Eric.
As a layperson, could you explain what you mean by modalities?
Sure.
Yeah, if you're reading a counseling textbook, there's going to be chapters on various techniques, and along the way in your training, you'll have professors who are kind of more or less pressuring you to pick one. What kind of therapy are you going to do? And some of it is more story-oriented, some of it's more cognition-oriented, so it lingers into what's the actual content of the session. So another question that people ask, and I do like this question, is what happens in a therapy session? That's a cool question to me. What happens? And people come from all different angles. Like, are we going to lay on a couch and interpret dreams? Well, that kind of sounds fun, but no, I'm not going to do that. And so, are you going to have people telling stories? Are you going to be analyzing the logic or lack thereof of thoughts. What are you going to be doing? And what Laura is saying eloquently is you can kind of do a mix of it all with this North Star of restoring and forming personhood. Yeah. The like kind of interesting thing that you bump up against in that is this idea that's pretty common in Christian circles that we're really supposed to be pressing the eject button on our humanness. There's this like idea, it's really sticky, that humanness is bad, and so I'm going to therapy to delete more of myself so that Christ can just kind of take over and I can disappear. And so people come in with pieces of themselves that they don't like, pieces that feel broken, and whether or not they're like consciously doing this, their idea is I need to get rid of more of me. And so much of what I'm doing is just the exact opposite. Actually, we want to heal what's broken, what's hurting inside of you, because Jesus cares about you and your whole person. And there's some tricky reframing. I mean, because Jesus does like empty himself all the way to the point of dying on a cross. And we're supposed to follow him. But I think if we stick with some of these ideas, or Paul talking about dying to himself, or John writing in chapter 3, verse 30 of his gospel account that he must become greater, I must become less. If we kind of stick with these people, these examples, these verses, Jesus was a really full person. He was a really whole and complete person. And so this emptying that he was doing and this sacrificing was coming from a very voluntary place. He was choosing to do it, which is like the pinnacle of power, is giving power away. And so I try to just kind of stick with that with people and very gently encourage them to consider not deleting more of themselves, but actually becoming more whole. And then choosing after that to like lay down their lives and sacrifice and serve. But like the key word that we're trying to get rid of is compulsion. We're wanting to invite people out of compulsive sacrifice and service and holiness into like empowered, freely chosen sacrifice and service and humility. And there's a huge difference in what happens to your mental health based on which direction you head with that. I see you guys nodding,
Yeah.
which is encouraging. Yeah.
I'm thinking about a beautiful metaphor that your wife told me that,
Oh, bring it on. Let's quote Jenna. Yeah.
well, she was talking about dance and how you can imitate the motions that you see someone else doing and force your body into postures that you don't really understand what kind of inner strength it takes to have in order to move into it in a sense that you're fully present in it and living into it. She talked about needing to relearn dance in a way that she wasn't just forcing her body into postures that were an imitation of someone else, but actually inhabiting. It was just a beautiful description of ways that often we need to relearn what it means to imitate Jesus, to not be just mimicking postures, but to be inhabited and made alive in such a way that we are actually feeling the love that we feel like we're needing to pretend that we have.
That was poignant. That's good. Yeah. Simple things like that were created in the image of God in Genesis 1 before the fall occurs in Genesis 3. It's just so critical to get that core thing right that we're trying to recover, the imago Dei, the image of God in you. That's the most true thing about you. I mean, the simple idea that God likes you is so just like slightly out of reach for so many people that I hang out with in these therapy sessions. Yeah, the verse you guys may have heard about, our good deeds are but filthy rags. That comes up a lot in therapy. It's like, even, Nathan, even the good things that I do, I still just, my motivation is mixed and it's messy and inconsistent. And if you go back and look at that verse in context, God is very much not saying that your earnest but imperfect good deeds are filthy rags to him. He's calling out hypocrisy, which is a totally different thing, which is where you're not actually doing good or earnest things, but you're trying to mask it and dress it up and make it look and seem pretty. God loves our earnest yet imperfect mixed bag of effort that we give, and he's like so much more fatherly than most of my guests seem to assume. And you're like writing a dissertation on that, so
Lord willing. Yes, as long as he's kind to me. So there's a kind of leaning into, I think, in so many things that we would like to take on, there can be this fear that God just isn't going to be kind. And I'm reading Martin Luther, and the change that happened in him from things that he said back in 1516 when he was writing about Romans to things that he says in 1531 when he's writing about Galatians, and his view of the love of God and what it means for God to be our creator has shifted so much in those 20 years. He talks about God wanting to be seen as God, not as an idol, which is that he wants to be kind to us, that he wants to help us. Where in 1516, he's thinking in these terms of needing to delete himself.
Wow.
That God is so great and he is so nothing that he should become very much nothing. And to shift to a mentality of, wait, God created out of nothing because he wanted someone there. So if
So
God,
great.
the creator, wills me to be in relationship to him in this dependence on his kindness, the thing that brings him glory is for me to treat him as that kind of a God.
Wow. Yeah, he doesn't have buyer's remorse
Right.
on.
Right.
Yeah. Mm. Parenting has magnified everything that you just said for me in the past year. Eric, what you got?
What if your guests are not Christian?
Oh, great. Great question. This could serve as a funnel from the community into the church, into membership in the church. Somebody in the community might hear that church has free counseling, and it can become kind of like a pathway for them to meet people in the church, get familiar with the church, feel comfortable in a church setting. Now we're not evangelizing in session, but what we are doing is trying to provide an incarnational encounter with the gentle and lowly and loving presence of Jesus. And so I think that could be a powerful thing to experience. A little tricky because we don't just want to become the community free counseling center, but a little bit of discernment there. If people are kind of like interested in what's going on here, we'd love to welcome them in, and we can always refer them out to external resources after a couple months if that's like not seeming like a fit for them. As a state licensed counselor, I am open to everybody. So people could go on my website if they're not coming through a church and they don't want to come through a church, they're not interested in doing that. People could just contact me A to B through my website. But as far as the church stuff goes, I think that's where my mind goes. Yeah.
So would you say, like, from a regular therapist who, like, more secular, for example, if a guest is non-Christian, would their experience with a church therapist be disadvantageous in comparison to, like, a normal therapist?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, when I see somebody just at my office, my little office in Vestavia, and they have no interest in Christianity or religion or spirituality, I'm meeting them on their terms and not imposing my like agenda and stuff. And they're just getting services like they would anywhere else. And for Laura, it might be a little different. I'm not sure how your side of the fence answers this question.
Yeah, I think if a person is comfortable, they can talk about anything. So I think one of the advantages of seeing a counselor rather than talking to your pastor is maybe people in the congregation, maybe members actually don't know what they believe, and want to talk about totally other things that don't seem to them to be related to God at all. They're still part of the community that the pastors are trying to serve well, and should be cared for in wherever they are in their story and listened to.
I love that. Love the simplicity of that. Yeah, you don't have to be like maintaining the dogma in order for us to care about you. That's cool and not always the case for people.
I also think there's a bit of a as you look at all of the modalities or the types of counseling that are available, everyone has a definition of a person and a sense of what a whole healthy person is. What would flourishing look like for a human being? Whether or not you call that a religion, that's a holistic view of the person. So whoever you're going to see for the health of your body or your mind or your spirit or your relationships, you should have some respect for their vision of what that will be. So,
I think the very definition of a friend is somebody who agrees with you on the good and pushes you towards it. So, as counselors, we very much try to be a friend to people. And if we agree on some kind of basic definition of the good, capital G, that's certainly going to help the process make more sense. Sometimes people need to shop around for therapists because like we're not the fit for them and somebody else will be. There is a version of counseling that tries to be so hands-off that it really is like a one-size-fits-all. Carl Rogers is the pioneer of this kind of counseling. It's very warm and very nice and empathetic, but you're literally not giving any input or feedback. You're not like poking the person at all. You're literally just like, man, that sounds hard. Man, I wish I could answer that. What do you think? And that can be helpful. It's not exactly what I think either of us are doing. It's a big part of what we're doing, but we probably want to press in a little deeper than that. And like you said at the very beginning, do some soul care. Yeah.
I actually love this concept a lot. So, let's say, optimistically or macro-wise, and you're thinking like in the future, would you want to like scale this up to like pair up nearby therapists to churches statewide, region-wide, or do you want to keep it like a more local like kind of thing?
Laura and I till the sun sets. No one else is allowed to join. Parachurch ministry for like 4 churches. That's the idea.
yeah, really limit the healing. As much as
It will never scale. Somebody else will have to do that.